Welcome to Fortress of Faith with Tom Wallace, calling North America to repentance and revival.
Welcome back to the Corner of Truth and Courage. This is Tom Wallace. Well, folks, yesterday we began talking about the Passover. This is the week of the Passover. You know, of course, as Christians, we typically call it Easter, and we get that from, naturally, the Bible in Acts chapter 12, verse 4. And it's a term that we find there in the Bible, and it's speaking of the word Easter. Now, Easter was not the actual word in the Bible. This is what we would call a dynamic equivalent. It's a time of the year that's also equivalent, similar to the date of the Passover. And so I want us to focus on the Passover. Yesterday we started on this topic, things that you may not know about the Passover. So yesterday we kind of talked about how on the 10th day the lamb was to be selected, and this was also the same day that the high priest would have gone out of Jerusalem, headed out towards Bethlehem, selected maybe 4 or 5 different lambs to be brought back into Jerusalem. They would have come in by the Damascus gate, and there the crowds would have assembled to cry Hosanna. This was something they did every year to celebrate the Passover. And so it was the day of selection of the Passover lamb. What's interesting is that the Passover lambs were born in Bethlehem. When they were born in the grotto out there in the shepherd's field, they would be wrapped in swaddling clothes and bandages so that they would be protected from being blotted or hurt or maimed. And this was a sign to the shepherds when the angels came and told them that in the field you'll find him lying in a manger. Manger is a feeding trough for animals. You'll find him where the animals are, wrapped in swaddling clothes. They knew exactly where to go. This is where the Levite priest kept the Pascha lambs that would be born, that would be offered up for sacrifice in the temple. And so, oddly enough, the very same time of the year that the Pascha lambs were being born was the same time when Jesus was born. So you see a lot of similarities. And then, of course, on the 4th day, and this is what's interesting that you may not know, if you then count, okay, so if the 10th day was Sunday, 4 days later, on the 14th day, they were to kill and eat the lamb. Now, the next day is the day of Passover. It's like a day off, a celebration and stuff, but they actually ate and killed the lamb on the 14th day. So Sunday, our Sunday would be considered typically, because in the calendar of the Jews, they work on a lunar calendar. We work on a solar calendar. Our days begin in the morning. Their days begin in the evening. In the evening and the morning were the first day. We see that in the Bible. So our Sunday would be kind of like their Monday. That's the 10th day. So Sunday, the 10th day. 11th day would be Monday. 12th day would be Tuesday. 13th day would be Wednesday. And the 14th day would be Thursday. So we do not get a Friday crucifixion. So this idea of a Friday crucifixion is impossible. Now, the reason for that, some come to that conclusion, is that, they had to get the body of Jesus Christ down before it was the time of the Sabbath. The weekly Sabbath falls on a Saturday. We know that. But weeks may also have a high Sabbath. The Bible refers to that week being a high Sabbath because they also had the Passover. So the Passover would be considered the Sabbath as well, the Shabbat. And in fact, one day when I was in Israel, I'll tell you a little story. On the Friday, I got away from the tour group that we were with, and I spent the day in the Arab quarter that whole day. Of course, that's the day that the Muslims go to pray. So I wanted to spend that day in Jerusalem, there where all the Muslims were going to be at. It was an interesting experience being in Jerusalem with all that as they go up to the Temple Mount to do their prayers. Of course, most of them come in at the Damascus Gate. That's on their side. And so I watched the masses of them coming through there. But I knew that the Jewish Shabbat was going to start at 6 p.m. because, again, their days start at 6 p.m. And so I knew I better get to the train. I better catch the train back to the hotel, or I'm going to be walking. And it was getting close to 6 o'clock, and literally I'm there, and as soon as I arrive, I see the train leaving, and so I had to walk 5 miles back to the hotel. But what was interesting is that within 10 minutes, almost like 10 minutes after 6. All of Jerusalem was like empty. All the streets just kind of like went gone. I was quite surprised at how quickly it all closed up for that Shabbat. Well, they had to get Jesus down, not for the weekly Shabbat, Sabbath, but for the high Sabbath of the Passover. And we know they were celebrating the Passover. The scriptures are very clear for that, as we talked about yesterday. So Jesus came in on Palm Sunday. We talked about that yesterday. And of course, all referring to Jesus being the Passover lamb. Now I want to draw our attention back to Exodus chapter 12, because this is where we have the first Passover. And I want to read some things that may have missed your attention. What's interesting is that, for months now, these plagues have been hitting Israel. Time and time again, Pharaoh digs his heels in. No, you're not going. His anger is kindled, and God still brings more and more judgment. But now we're coming to the last of the judgments. And Moses gives a lot of instructions to them to prepare for this Passover, for this meal. And on the 10th day, they were told to go select their lamb without spot, inspect him for 4 days. And on the 4th day in the evening, we're going to take that lamb, take its life, take the life of something that's innocent, shed the innocent blood, and spread it on the doorpost as a symbol of our faith and obedience to God. And therefore, the death angel, when he comes at midnight, he will pass over our home and continue on to those who did not obey, who did not have the faith to put out the blood, to take the blood, the sacrifice of something innocent, and to lay that out as a extension of their faith so that they would not be judged. They're told this, that when they eat of their Passover, verse 11, and thus shall ye eat it with your loins girded, your shoes on your feet, and your staff in your hand, and ye shall eat it in haste. It is the Lord's Passover. So he's telling them, when you do this, you need to be doing this kind of quickly, okay? Don't be dawdling around. This isn't going to be a meal that will last through the evening. And you're going to be, have your clothes on, be girded, get your shoes on, have your staff in your hand, and eat this in haste. Why? Because in less than 6 hours, they're going to be thrown out of Egypt. We continue reading in Exodus chapter 12, and we find that in verse 29, and it came to pass that at midnight, the Lord smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, the firstborn of Pharaoh. And a little later on, in probably tomorrow's broadcast, I'll tell you his name. We know the name of the Pharaoh. We know his firstborn son that had died, and we'll get into that in tomorrow's broadcast. But Pharaoh's firstborn that sat on Pharaoh that sat on the throne, unto the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon. So from the highest to the lowest, all the firstborn, their lives would be taken from them if they did not put the blood on the doorpost. And it says, and all the firstborn of the cattle. So it wasn't just to the people, it was to their livestock as well. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, and all the servants and the Egyptians that were there, was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where there was not one dead. So there was great lamentations going on that evening. But let's drop down to verse number 31. And he called for Moses and Aaron by night, and said, Rise up and get you forth from among my people, both ye and the children of Israel, and go. In verse 32, and take your flocks and your herds, and be gone, he says to them. In verse 33, and the Egyptians were urgent upon the people that they might send them out of the land in haste. So upon this very first Passover, we had the death angel had come, and if any family that did not follow in obedience and put the lamb, the blood of the lamb, upon the doorpost of their home, that death angel visited them. All over Egypt, the Egyptians refused to obey, refused to yield, refused to believe, and therefore they suffered the judgment. There's people today who still refuse to believe, refuse to bow their knee, refuse to believe in the Lamb. And their day of judgment is still coming. But on that day of those who believed, they followed, they ate their meal in haste, and within hours they were being thrown out of their homes and begged of the Egyptians to leave. And not only did they leave, they left with great wealth. The Bible tells us that they spoiled the Egyptians, that they took of their gold, of their silver, of their livestock, everything they needed, and the people were happy for them to take it. Just get out of here, fulfilling the Scripture's promise of Genesis chapter 15, when God made his covenant with Abraham. He told him that you're going to spend 400 years. Your seed will spend 400 years in Egypt, but they will come back with great wealth, great substance, the Bible said. We'll continue more tomorrow, and I hope you'll join us tomorrow at the corner of truth and courage. God bless you.
Are you enjoying Fortress of Faith? Hi, this is Gil Ford. Have you ever thought about how easy it is to just simply turn the radio on? And for free, we get edified by the teaching and insight of our favorite programs. We become grateful consumers of someone else's effort, work, and sacrifice, and somehow it is there every day on our radio for free. Yet, it is not free. It costs a great deal to the ministry to produce and air their program. Don't just be a consumer, become a partner. Our spring fundraiser is here, and we need your support to keep sharing the unfiltered truth. Visit fortressoffaith.com to donate today. Together, let's build a fortress of faith that stands strong. Your tax-deductible gift makes it possible. That's fortressoffaith.com or call 800-616-0082. Again, that's fortressoffaith.com or call 800-616-0082.